all the participants of the online chess Olympiad. During a difficult time for everyone during this pandemic, it's really nice that we've already enjoyed one online Olympiad last year, and we're going to enjoy a second one this year. There are some clear advantages because we get to play our matches, and then if we so choose, we can watch a lot of the other matches. In an actual Olympiad, that it depends on the state of your game, but here, because of the staggered nature, we can experience chess in all its facets. I think it's wonderful that FIDE and its sponsors are putting together a second Olympiad, which is, after all, technically very challenging to do. And I wish you all lots of chess happiness, a very enjoyable month where for a few hours every day, we'll forget about the world and just immerse ourselves in the world of chess. Oh, and by the way, I hope your team does well. All the best. Good luck.
Warm welcome on behalf of FIDE to all the participants and organizers of the second FIDE Online Olympiad. We are happy to have it the second year in a row after the success last year when more than 160 teams participated in the event. This year we have about the same number, and this is another confirmation that people loved it, both chess players and spectators. We are happy to be joined by chess.com, and we are specifically grateful to our Chinese partners, Shenzhen City, and multiple institutions of Shenzhen, and their support is enormous and very much welcome to FIDE and the whole chess community. Best of luck, stay cool, play chess, love chess. Genshin Osamus.
Hello everyone, I'm Hou Yifan from China. Biggest congratulations on the opening of the second FIDE Online Olympiad. It is a great opportunity as gathering the chess players of different country, different age, different level together to play chess games, to learn new ideas, and to share personal thoughts. The traditional Olympiad is one of the most important chess competitions of the world, and I really hope that our online Olympiad will become such an event while people discussing about the online chess competitions, especially after its great success of the year 2020. I would like to express my gratitude to FIDE, to chess.com, to sponsors and supporters in China and Russia. Thanks to all the efforts you've made to make this event happen. Finally, wish all the team, all the participants best of luck in the coming month, and hope the performance of my team would be much better than the last year.
So first online Olympiad was obviously a very important event. Last year it united players from all over the world, and for us it was very important first experience of such a huge event. To put all together was a very difficult task, but I think overall it was a success story. And in a time of a pandemic, it really brought together players. It brought together chess spectators, fans. It made it into news in several countries, especially in those where participants were, successful, but not necessarily on the final stage like Russia or India or Poland, where it became like national story for some time. But also in some local successes like qualifiers to the next stage, or assembling all the team together, or putting up for the first time a team for online Olympiad, or for any Olympiad indeed. So it was, I think it was quite meaningful, and that's why we decided to continue with this second edition. For the second time, it never looks like, as exciting. Okay, we saw it already last year, and one may think, okay, it's just something that we remember. It was not too far long ago. We have to understand, and I think that's an important message. Our attitude towards what's going on with the pandemic, with the possibility to play, with all the life, whether it is normal, semi-normal, or very abnormal, depends very much on where we are located. I mean, if a country undergoes some sort of wave, whether it is third wave or fourth wave, you feel that really this event is contributing much, because otherwise you wouldn't have a chance to participate, to travel elsewhere, or to participate in your country. If a country is relatively safe, or your region is relatively safe, you may think, okay, I have another options to play in OTB tournaments. And obviously for most of us, OTB tournaments are seem to be like something more serious than established, and that's fair assessment. But it gives us a chance now really to unite players from many countries which would be deprived of this possibility. Unfortunately, we also had to delay proper Olympiad and to make an online edition this year as well. But it doesn't take away from the seriousness of the event. I saw the lineups, and most of the teams, most of the federations really have the strongest lineup, and the favorites as well. And we know that they take it seriously, and we would see a lot of top chess. But for FIDE, it is also important that we engage many countries, many players that otherwise wouldn't have this possibility to participate. So it is, as Olympiad should be, it is not only a sportive event, but it's sort of, bringing together many countries, many players, with a possibility also to qualify. We set divisions, so there are 4 divisions, and they can qualify from division 4 to 3, 3 to 2, and so on. Altogether, there are 155 teams, slightly less than it was last year. Last year it was 163, but it's on the same scale. And if you think about it, that for many it was the first edition, which was really important. We actually managed to preserve nearly all the same number. And what is important for us, we also managed to preserve the high quality of the event. Because needless to say, for many spectators, they may say now, well, I'm a bit tired of online chess. There have been one online event after another, one tour after another, one week of blitz tournaments. I specifically do not name it, not to attack any particular series or any particular chain of events. But online chess has been already like for 1.5 years all over the place, and many people sort of tired of it, and not really as excited as they were a year ago. That is normal. I mean, the competitions of the high level, if you see at the World Cup, would inevitably bring more audience. But this kind of event is still remaining special. So it still remains this feeling that bring all the best players from your country to play for your country, to compete with either with your neighbors or with actually those who are a few thousand miles away, because the composition of the divisions we made very actually the preparation was very difficult, because you have to not only to match the teams according to their strengths, but also according to their time zones. You cannot really mix a team which is in the Pacific with a team which is in Europe, because then you wouldn't find proper time to have their matches. So we try to allocate it to make the groups, the pools balanced, at the same time to have time difference as a reasonable gap, so it could be fair to one or other team. It could happen at the later stage that some of the teams would be in slightly handicapped position, because you cannot predict now who would qualify, and then how they would let's say mix up with other teams in this division. But we do our best. I can say that we allocated a team of 5-6 people who are working specifically only on this project for already 2 months. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of with federations. Many federations are are required this sort of help to both technically on to explain how to register, to explain how to list the players, but also on a level of asking all sorts of questions which we need to guide them through. And the cooperation with chess.com has been actually on a very good level, so we expect it to be a successful event.
Dear friends, I'm happy to take part in the second FIDE Online Olympiad, and I'm proud to be a member of the Russian national team. It's a great opportunity and experience for each chess player. Last year, our team had an excellent result, and this time we are going to show the best we can. I wish good luck to everyone and look forward to seeing you at the World Chess Olympiad 2022 in Russia.
Hello, I'm Sabrina Tsolokidou from Greece, and I'd like to say a few words about the upcoming online chess Olympiad. Well, I think that it's very important that FIDE is organizing the event online for the last 2 years, considering how difficult it would be to have the event done in person because of COVID-19. But in this way, they're still giving us a chance to participate, represent our countries, enjoy the games, and have a chance to succeed. And so I think we should definitely thank all the people who contribute to the successful conduct of the tournament, and that they managed to bring us all together again despite the difficult situation in the world. Personally, I think I will never forget the excitement I had in my first Olympiad in Tromsø 2013, where it was my first time playing in a tournament amongst such elite chess players. I'm also very happy because last year in the online Olympiad, me and my team Greece had a great performance, so I wish we will have a similar one this year as well. So good luck to everyone, and enjoy the games, and I hope we'll meet each other again next year and hopefully in person.
Hello everybody, my name is Elizabeth Pates. I'm a chess player from Germany, and I'm very happy to represent my country during the biggest chess online event of all time, the Online Chess Olympiad. With over 155 teams from all over the world, it will be the biggest online event of all time, and I'm very thankful to FIDE and chess.com to organize it one more time after 2020 in August and September this year. Especially during the pandemic, it is very difficult for a lot of professional and non-professional chess players to get a little bit back of the special feeling and spirit which we usually face when we play over the board. The chess Olympiad was actually the biggest over-the-board event of all time. It was not only a chess event, it was a very social event, and it is badly missed. With the Chess Online Olympiad, we will be able to get a little bit back of this spirit, and also we will be able to maybe face among all these teams one of or some of the strongest players in the world, or some of the biggest chess talents in the world, and it will be a lot of fun and joy. Well, in this moment I can only wish all the teams and players a lot of fun, a lot of success, and show the best team win.
Research university with unique strength in its discipline areas and global perspective, is on track for rapid development. Founded on the consensus reached between Chinese President Xi Jinping and Russian President Vladimir Putin, Shenzhen MSU BIT University is the first Chinese foreign cooperative university in China to introduce premium educational.
And we are here for the FIDE Online Olympiad finale. It is Team USA versus Team Russia. I'm Robert Hess. Alongside me today, Jennifer Shahade. Jen, we saw some great action yesterday. I am super excited for the final today.
That's right. What a shocker we had yesterday with the United States losing their first match to India, but then coming back, winning the second one, and also winning the tiebreak. Meanwhile, Russia, just an incredible dominant team, Robert. This is going to be quite the final.
It certainly will be. And let's remind everyone of what the final will look like, the format that we've been using throughout the playoff stage here in the Online Olympiad. 15 minutes plus 5-second increment. That means all players start with 15 minutes. Every single move you make, you gain 5 seconds on the clock. So when you get into time trouble, you can rebuild some time. That way you can actually think when you make your moves. And we are well into the elimination stage. 2 teams remain as we pull up the bracket here. USA versus Russia, as Jen mentioned. USA stormed back against India, which was a definite favorite in that matchup. And then Russia against China, probably a toss-up, but Russia proved too dominant in yesterday's action.
That's right. You look at this bracket and we just get a sense of how much adversity the teams had to face in order to get to this spot, particularly the United States, because not only did they beat India in tiebreak, they also beat Kazakhstan in tiebreak. So an exhausted American team, but potentially also a motivated and fired up team as well.
Yeah, the adrenaline can carry over to today's action, and they're going to have their hands full. You and I highlighted it at the end yesterday. It's particular, the Russian women are so strong. I think they boast 3 of the top 6 rated players in the women's side of things. So that's just an impressive, and you see, actually, it is 3 of the top 6. Alexandra Goryachkina, Katerina Lakhno, and Alexandra Kostenyuk there. And of course, Polina Shuvalova there. She is the junior girl player for Team Russia. That's where I think that Russia needs to strike.
Yeah, and I think what's particularly important about the Russian women is not only are they total boss grandmasters, but they're also really good at blitz. So some of the, like we saw Humbi Canero maybe a bit stronger in classical than in blitz. She even said herself when she won a big rapid tournament, the World Women's Rapid, she was surprised. It's not her specialty. Ho Yifan also seems even better in classical formats. But the Russian women, that's not the case. So they are really tough in blitz competition. So that's going to be tough for the Americans, but Irina played quite well yesterday. So we'll see if she can repeat that performance today.
She certainly did. Unfortunately for Team USA, on the second women's board, whether it was Anna Zatonsky or Nazi Paikidze, they struggled because Harika Dronavali is a very strong player, scored all 3 wins in the contest, both in the rapid 2 games and then in the blitz tiebreaker. So for Team USA, they need to right the ship on those boards, but Jeffrey Zhang has been improving, and he beat Vishy Anand before taking down Patalahari Krishna in the blitz. So I think that things are looking up on some of the boards. They just need to make sure that they hold steady on some others.
That's right, Robert. I mean, a lot of players have gotten a lot of practice on blitz time controls over the last year and a half. So what might have been true a couple of years ago, not necessarily true now, right? Take Irina Krush, not generally known for her blitz skills, but she's been playing a lot more of these events, and she's a champion, an 8-time US champion. So it makes sense that she'd be working on that aspect of her game. So don't count people out who you might have really changed things up in the last 6 months, last year and a half.
It's a very fair point where players who historically have struggled may have improved because they had to. The way they were playing was online. In fact, Irina Krush won the Women's Championship, United States Women's Championship, that is, in the online format. And just to remind everybody that we will have 2 matches. We're going to start shortly. And then after that, there is a chance to rebound. Even if you lose match 1, there will be a second match to be played. But when we look at the lineups here, Jen, we see Jeffrey Zhang against Danil Dubov, Artemiev against Robson, Krush against Goryachkina, Kostenyuk in, Nazi Paikidze also in, a Wonder Liang takes on Yesepenko, and Shuvalova there taking on Cervantes. I mean, as I look at those pairings, Jen, not a single board is there an advantage for Team USA.
But that's what you said yesterday about the India USA final. And we won quite convincingly in the blitz portion, in fact. So they put up a lot of surprises. I mean, in particular, Robson and Zhang played incredibly well, like openings very well prepared, very quick. And so we'll see if they can do it again. But here we have the games underway, and let's take a look and dig in to this first board matchup.
Yeah, we're just starting. Opening moves being played. We have a symmetrical English. White put the pawn on c4. Black said, let me do the same, put the pawn on c5. And now e6, the first sort of difference in the board state for the players. e4 is a common move, but Jeffrey playing this calmly. He's just going to fin counter the bishop, and he's going to try to leave Dubov with an isolated pawn in the event of pawn takes d5, and now d4 here. Exactly. Predictable.
Yeah, well, when you play really solid chess openings, it's not bad to be predictable. Let's see what's going on in our board too. As I mentioned, Ray Robson had a stellar result yesterday. And let's see how he's faring against Artemiev. What do we have here? Another English, right?
Another English. I don't know if the players all prepared together or what the deal was, but we have an English. The difference here being that the pawn is on c7, not on c5. So it's not a symmetrical English, but Artemiev plays very solidly. He plays this move d3, opening up the bishop, potentially to g5. And this d5 square, Jen, that's often the key square in these types of positions where black often wants to push through to d5 and white wants to prevent that from happening or make it a little less easy.
Right. And now black has a decision about that bishop on f8. Do you want to put it on b4? Do you want to try to tuck it in on e7, c5? So a big choice here for Ray, as well as what you mentioned about the move d5.
That's right. Let's keep going around while we have a chance to, because the action is just starting up here. We have this game, which is pretty far along between a Wonder Liang and Andrei Yesepenko. Yesepenko is 2,700 plus in classical chess. His rapid rating, still nothing to sneeze at, just about 2,700. But a Wonder has the white pieces, and he had a great day yesterday where he drew Nihal Saran with black, then he beat Pragnananda with white. He gets the white pieces in game one. And Jen, as I look at this board state, black has an isolated pawn, has the bishop pair. That's the good news, but not much space to use those bishops.
No, my first impression of the position is positive for white, because you look at it and you see all this center control, right? So what opening was this? Was this some kind of Steinitz or?
I used to play the Steinitz, so I thought the same, but it happened to be a Berlin, which kind of transposes into the Steinitz with his d6 move. And after castle a6, challenging the bishop, that is why bishop takes c6 hurts black's pawn structure, but black gets the bishop pair.
Right. So a Ruy Lopez position, and here we see game phase for Episenko as he's covering his eyes there, trying to I guess get deeper into this position. What bring us back up to our current position?
Okay, here we go. Queen b8 was the last move that Yesepenko
Queen b8 played. Okay, so the b2 pawn is not really hanging, guys, because it looks a little bit too risky to take that, right? Like
Right.
if I were to play like a move like h3, Robert, are you really going to take that pawn?
I guess he was thinking about it, and I Wonder said, I don't even want to calculate it. And that's one good thing to do in Rapid is you can't spend too much time because you're only 15 minutes for the whole game. But it's a great question, Jen. Can you take the pawn? I guess you can get away with it, although the queen is going to be chased around to a3. It's kind of an awkward situation. But I Wonder said, I don't even want to calculate it. Let's just play b3. And after queen b7, I think one idea that Yesepenko has gained in the position is not just putting pressure on the e4 pawn, but a5 to a4, getting rid of your isolated pawn on the queen side while trying to break open some files for your rook and your queen sitting there. But I Wonder continues to play in the center, Jen. I really like the start of the game here for the junior board for Team USA.
I do too, and I like how quickly he's playing as well, because he knows moves like b3 and rook d1. You know, who knows if they're like the absolute perfect move in the position, but the key thing is they're good moves and they're played quickly, right? Because you're going to need every minute later in the game. b3, maybe black wasn't going to take the pawn next move, but you're going to have to think about it at some point. So very practical play by a Wonder Liang, which I really like.
Yeah, I agree. There has been some moments where a Wonder has moved too quickly. When Donnie and I were commentating the match against Kazakhstan the other day, he had plenty of time, his opponent didn't, and he was sort of playing for his opponent's time trouble, and he ended up stumbling and losing that game. But at this early stage, I think he's doing everything correctly. You couldn't ask for more if you're team captain John Donaldson from this board. But let's check out some of the others to see if they're holding their end of the bargain, because the game between Kostenyuk and Nazi Pakidze, that's one I'm very interested in. The new FIDE Women's World Cup champion, Kostenyuk, and then Nazi Pakidze plays a Sicilian. Are we sure that Nazi's black in this game? Because she's a tried and true Caro-Kann player. So Jen, what do you make of this decision by Nazi against such a strong grandmaster in Kostenyuk?
Well, I don't hate it, because I think that Nazi is, she took some time off chess, but potentially she was studying for a long time. I know that Nazi is very disciplined, so I wouldn't be surprised if she has been working on her Sicilian over the last few months when she took that break from chess, and that she's ready to try this aggressive opening, not only here, but potentially in her US Championship outing next month in St. Louis.
Yeah, it's a good point. She could have been studying behind the scenes. I know she is very busy, of course, but it looks like she has prepared a new opening. The clock situation, though, Jen, she's the one spending time and playing a new opening. That would worry me if I'm supporting her or if I'm her teammate, but she plays move knight c5 relatively quickly at this point. The point is that the d5 square is often one that white wants to jump into. If you trade on c5 here, say knight takes c5, pawn takes c5, next the rook is coming to d8, and that challenges the queen. And with the bishop on e6, the knight on f6, it seems like black doesn't have too poor of a position, actually can be very happy to get this kind of setup.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I'm going to be hard pressed to criticize somebody for trying the Sicilian because it's such a great opening to have in your repertoire, right? You get to use it for solidity, but you can also try to use it for a win. So right. I do enjoy that Nazi is trying this out. And I like the position for black too.
Well, it's funny. It seems like you love the Sicilian. I don't really dabble with the Sicilian too much. It's one of the major reasons I stopped playing e4 because of fear of the Sicilian. So these positions are kind of complicated for my taste, a little too tactical in nature. This one, not so much. But I do like the last move that Kosteniuk played of knight back to d2, because for most players, I got to go forward. I need to capture. She's saying we traded only one pawn, and I have more space thanks to my pawn on a5 over here. Maybe I can play b4. The timing is right. And eventually the knight can land on the d5 square. So she's trying to use the space. And when you have more space, you do not want to trade because then your opponent's pieces step on each other's toes. Now, wow, we just had an en passant on b6. The
b5 played by Nazi, followed by queen takes b6, putting ourselves in the line of fire, allowing the move knight a4. Was this a good decision by Nazi? I'm not sure because that pawn on a6 now is a weakness as well. So what happens now if knight a4, the queen, where would you put the queen? You got to put it on b7 to protect the a6, huh?
Yeah, and then after this position, I think it looks worse than it actually is for white because, for black, because these pawns are isolated here. But now there's no knight d5 happening. This knight on d2 maybe isn't the best placed piece. The b2 pawn's under attack. Maybe black can play pawn to c4. So I really think that this isn't so bad for black, although my impulse was to say, ooh, this is great for white. I would never have this for black. The more I actually dive in and think, this is okay.
I agree. And I don't know if knight takes knight a4 and knight takes c5 is the right decision. Maybe white wants to play a little differently, but it looks like Alexandra did play knight a4, but will she follow it up when the immediate knight takes c5? I'm not sure because like you talked about earlier, Robert, when we play knight takes c5, it closes the c file if you take with the pawn, but it does open up the d file for the rook. And it also gives a little bit of extra space for the bishop on e7 potentially. So that's a transition. It's not obvious white wants to make.
That's right. And just to go one move deeper, b3, we're talking about the c4 move. And now the bishop really has life. While the pawn was in d6, the bishop was stuck being a defensive piece. Now it can get active. c4 is defended by multiple pieces. So I think this is the way that Nazi will like to go here. And this is what's happening. So we're predicting the action, it's unfolding, and b3 played. We'll see if Nazi plays c4. It's a bit difficult to do that because you're ceding the bishop pair, but that's okay. If the position calls for it, you have the knight and bishop against the bishop pair. It's not like the bishop on f3 is doing all that much yet, but it will once it gets back to e2. So black probably needs to make a decision quickly, not just because of her clock situation, but because if white can reroute some of the pieces, I think that black's structure is quite poor.
Now look at how quickly Alexandra Kosteniuk is playing. She's only used 30 seconds. Of course, there is that increment, but overall, it's not because the position is easy and doesn't seem like this is any kind of preparation because we're pretty far deep into it. I think it's just a practical decision as she sees Nazi eat up her time and play the move rook d8, a very natural move.
And queen e2 played instantly. I mean, Alexandra is not even thinking, and I don't mean that in a bad way. I actually mean in a very good way. As you're saying, she's playing practical chess. There was a pin. She gets out of the pin. She puts pressure on a6. Her queen covers the c4 square, which was played as a pawn sacrifice. But now white can take that pawn and get the bishop pair after we see these trades on c4. So it's not the end of the world for black. These are double isolated pawns. The bishop on f3 is just a defensive piece for now. But it's clear that white should be slightly preferred in this position, although Nazi made a practical choice herself to push that pawn to c4.
Yeah, the thing is, I think Alexander's just thinking on Nazi's time, thinking that, hey, if I can double my opponent's time, well, that's going to give me a big edge in the game. So far, both players playing great, but Russia with the big practical advantage here. Let's check back in later on. What about the junior girls board? I don't think we've seen that in a little bit between Talia Cervantes and Polina. I'll hear you brought it up.
Yeah, and actually, Talia had a position just like this yesterday with the black pieces. And so she likes this kind of opening. She gets the bishop pair. White gets this very strong center. And look at this last move as we tuned in. Jen, C5, it's a pawn that's hanging, but as soon as you capture it, a rook comes to C8, pinning the bishop to the queen.
That's right. So that pawn is currently poisoned. But what about the move knight 8? Knight h4 is not in the position because the bishop on h4 is taking it. And I don't think that would really help us at all in any situation. So what do we do here as white? Because you've got this d4 threat. Do we just have to move our queen back? That seems extremely unpleasant.
Yeah, I'm starting to wonder because bishop c5, rook, I'm not sure which rook to c8, but let's bring the a rook. That looks more natural. b4. Does b6 just win a piece, or does white have some saving grace here? Because the eval bar is at zeros. To my eyes, like that's a piece. No, like that bishop is pinned.
Maybe they want to play. I don't know. Yeah, that is bizarre. What are you missing here? I mean, is there any kind of sacrifice here, like bishop e7 and bishop takes f8? I don't think so. So you're saying rook a6. Got it.
It's a pin of your own, right? You're pinned, so let's pin our opponent. We're all pinned. It's a good time, but I don't see any advantage for white. But
what about rook c6? Rook c6. You just have rook takes b6. Okay. No, wait, no, you don't have that, right? What's the move here for white?
I think you have knight d4, the only move to hit this.
Okay. So yeah,
it's close though. It's really that close of a situation where it's hard to play this in advance, but once you arrive at the position, it becomes a little bit easier for.
And then bishop takes c5 there. What was bishop takes c5 after knight d4? Just because that position was still a little bit crazy. I'm just curious.
Yeah, let's
so
check
b4, b6, and then you point out this move rook a6 counter pin, and then if rook c6, you have knight d4, and if knight d4, bishop takes c5. What happens here? Do you just have knight takes c6 allowing bishop takes f2 check?
I guess
so, because king takes f2, and now knight e7 check is a big threat as well. Oh boy.
See, that's a great illustration of a position that's way easier to find at the moment than in advance. I was not expecting this knight to end up on c6, the king on f2, but once you're forced into it, yeah, these positions become easier to see. So right in the current position, queen a3 was played because that was too wild of a line. She should be practical, conserving her time. But after rook c8, the pawn is protected. Just a quick note, d4 does not work because your bishop on e7 is hanging. So bishop takes d4, pawn takes d4, you get the bishop right back with a pawn advantage. So that's why the move rook a to c8 and c3 played by white. But black has to be super thrilled, to get to this position with the bishop pair, with strong pawns in the center. Jen, this looks like a great situation for Team USA.
Yeah, and that's a good example of why you shouldn't pay too much attention to the engine bar, because that was a little bit of a weird line, self-pinning yourself, kind of like extricating yourself with all these weird tactics. I'm not saying that like Shuvalova isn't capable of seeing it, particularly in a classical game, but in a quick, rapid game, it's a little unrealistic, right? You just got to make a move.
That's right.
And some of those tactics are a little convoluted.
I agree completely.
Yeah, in reality, this position, great practical advantage, I think, for black, except should point out she doesn't only have those 7 minutes. So she is taking her time compared to Polina. And that's a theme we've seen so far in the women's boards. But have we seen Irina Krush's game, speaking of women? And let's take a look at the teams, by the way. Let's look at their full rosters. Here we have the USA team. Look at these game faces. We see many players wearing the blue US chess team shirt. And we also have our Russian lineup, where we are going to see all of the Russian players. And yeah, I mean, just a lot of game faces right now, Robert, as not a lot of time to relax in this time control.
One thing sticks out to me, and it's Alexander Kostenyuk's setup, because she's a streamer. It is super professional and nice, but all players, they are locked into their positions. They're not taking a single move for granted, because this is the championship of the FIDE Online Olympiad here. And I brought up Irina Krush's game. She is the white pieces against Alexandra Goryachkina, who is a player on the rise. She did super well in the Russian super final, a 6.5 out of 9, beating grandmasters like Dreyev. And that's super impressive. I've used the word super so many times because that is how well she's been playing. And she made this last move c5, Jen, opening that bishop on b7. And they typically say in positions like this, if we go back a few moves just to see how clogged the lane was for the bishop, once you get these c5 breaks in, black is often happy.
And yet Irina is the one female player on this squad who's actually ahead on the clock. So that's good to see from the US perspective. But I agree, a nice position for black indeed. And that super final you mentioned, that was a mixed gender tournament, right? Where
Yes.
she went over 2,600 FIDE for the first time.
That's right. And she did a +4 performance and I think it was a half point off of first place. So it was just a monstrous event for her. And she continues to thrive no matter the competition. And right now, c5 played looking good for her. Her queen and bishop lining towards the king side. Her bishop now open on the long diagonal. And white's pieces, while they're doing okay, there's problems with the c4 pawn, for example. That bishop is kind of tethered to it as a defensive piece, and it's not clear how to proceed for white.
Yeah, and that's why we see Irina now sinking into a think. Well, how do you feel about the move e4? As it does seem like her rook on e1 is positioned to try to get that move in, but the problem is, I think what you just mentioned, you're going to take on d4 and then stick your knight on e5, and suddenly it's bad news for me.
Yeah, this knight has squares to go, and the e5 squares under black's control because the pawn d4 is gone. So that's why Irina played a4, and then immediately a capture. The pawn captures back, and that allows potentially bishop f4 as a move if you need it. Black can consider playing pawn to e5. I don't know the full consequences of that move, but I'm certainly considering it because I want to pry open the dark squares. If you play d5, give me that c5 square. Thank you very much. Although my bishop on b7 isn't quite thrilled about that situation.
Yeah, wow. This one is going to get juicy. I mean, I don't think Irina is much worse in this position, but I can see what you mean, that it kind of requires a little bit more thought to play with those hanging pawns, right? Which is good because she has 2 extra minutes than her opponent.
That is, it requires thought from both sides, and Irina is ahead in the clock. So let's check out some other games once more. I think we've had a peek at the very least at all of them. Let's go back to the top board between Jeffrey Zhang and Daniil Dubois because that has changed quite a bit. We tuned in very early in this game. They were blitzing out moves back here, and it was an isolated pawn for black. So as we go to the game position, you see that there's no longer isolated pawns, but this pawn to c6 can often become a target. And Jeffrey played straightforward chess, attacking the bishop. The bishop moves. He plays b3. Let's develop our bishop on the fianchetto, and then e3. We have a solid pawn structure here. The bishop is open. The knight is attacking this bishop. A rook coming to c1. I always find these positions so much easier to play from the white side, Jet.
Yeah, I agree. All right. So we've got a really nice position here for Jeffrey at the moment, but you're moving forward as it looks like he managed to trade off the dark squared bishops. But this looks even easier to play for white now.
I agree, although this alpha 0 like h-pawn thrust and a rook on d6, if that knight moves out the way, is there a possibility the rook comes to h6? I think it's too far-fetched to plan, but that's in the back of my mind is looming. Maybe I can get an attack for black, because if not, rook c5, clear plan, rook a5, hitting the bishop, hitting the a7 pawn.
Yeah.
It feels like white just has a bind over the entire position.
Yeah, you got to figure out a way to attack for black. And we see the engine analysis bar has no issues with black, so they must figure out a way. Maybe like bishop c8 with your idea of knight g4 and like rook h6. Because I mean, bishop on a6 was no longer doing anything. And yeah.
Yeah, it looks very scary because the knight on g4 can't be kicked out. There's no h-pawn for white to push to h3. So for instance, if I just go ahead with my plan rook a5, here comes knight g4, you give up that pawn. That pawn's irrelevant because the queen's coming over here. I would not want white's position. This rook can come to f6, the queen to h5. It looks like there's just a huge attack and white's not ready to parry off all the threats.
No, I mean, I really liked white until I saw the move bishop c8 because without, bishop c8 is a backward move. So it's a little bit tricky to see. But then when you see it, you're like, uh-oh, like that knight's coming to g4 and like bad things are happening.
And it's amazing because rook c5 looks like a good move. right? You're
Yes.
playing your rook up to double potentially, your rook coming to a5 to create threats, and yet it's a move that the engine doesn't like. And once you find that backward move, bishop c8, it's justified why the position is favorable for black. Knight e4.
But he didn't play that. He played a different move. But I'm sure this one's also a little bit scary for white. Knight e4, just attacking the rook on a5 on c5, and so it's moved to a5. He was not afraid of bishop takes c4 because that would leave your light squares completely demolished.
Oh, yeah.
So, yeah,
that would not be good, as you're saying. So instead, rook a5, and well, now what do you do about this situation, Jen? Because bishop c8 is still possible, and I think you have to play it. You can't really afford to play queen b7. That looks bad. So bishop c8.
Yeah, I don't think so. Unless you're trying to. Yeah, what's the idea here? Is there
maybe the same? Just attack. Have no
just
fear.
give up that pawn? Yeah.
There might be a sack.
Yes, there's rook f6 possibilities. There's sack possibilities.
I think that's what Dubov is probably going for, because when you give up the queen side like this, you know that if you do nothing and the position just sort of remains the same, you're going to lose in the long run. So by playing knight e4 and bishop c8, you just need to go for it. Bring your pieces into the attack. And white doesn't have many defenders. So the bishop on g2 and the rook on e1 is protecting this pawn e3 just in case there are sacrifices. But outside of that, it does feel like white is lacking defenders.
And bishop b5 played. Okay, so that wasn't the move we were expecting, but also makes a lot of sense because there's sometimes going to be some ideas with like bishop takes a4 and c5 even.
That's true. That push could be very annoying, just marching up the board. And bishop takes e4 is never really an idea for white because of the light squares that you mentioned earlier. So it's a tough position for Jeffrey to figure out. I don't know if I would get fully greedy and take this pawn. The one thing going for Jeffrey in particular is the time advantage. He has 7 minutes, Dubov under 4, and this remains a complicated battle.
Well, what about queen takes a7? I think that one might be even worse, right? Because then too many of our pieces are kind of on the a file.
Yeah.
And after just the simple queen f6, we actually literally immediately have problems. And by the way, that's one reason why the bishop went to b5. Not about taking on a4, as I originally said. I don't think that was the main reason, although it could come up in some variation, but it stops the rook from coming to either e2 or f1. And that's why the computer thinks white is already busted here. You just can't defend f2.
No, not without giving up that bishop. And we've talked about the light squares plenty of times. So queen g5 was played after rook takes a7. It is looking like a position where Dubov, he can strike. And look at the evaluation bar go down after knight c3. To me, that immediately means alert, knight takes g3 or knight takes f2. We are benefiting from the evaluation bar, but knight takes g3, pawn takes g3, queen takes g3, rook is under attack, rook can come to g6, rook can come to h6. This e3 pawn is a bit loose as well. There aren't defenders towards the white king.
If only I could play knight takes b5 here and then play rook e2. But the problem is you have the in-between move, queen takes e1 check.
Exactly.
Killing me because I just want to get rid of your bishop so I can play rook e2. It's not, without being able to play that move, I guess I have to try rook d1 or something. I got to move my rook. And then after rook g6, rook d2. But the problem is you also have rook e3 in the position, right? And then you're threatening rook e1 check. Oh man, I just don't have enough guys defending. And it's that rook on a7. Normally that rook on a7 would be a little bit, exciting. I have my rook in the 7th rank and I captured a pawn. But here it's the contrary. It's a nightmare. We want that rook to catapult back to d1 and defend our position.
Exactly. And in the game, it looks like knight takes f2 was played. And the engine does not approve the wrong knight sacrifice. I wonder what the big difference is, because after king takes f2, I'd imagine rook f6 check is the idea to try to get this g3 pawn anyway.
Maybe bishop f3 holds the...
You gave white an extra choice, and that is often a bad thing. Optionality is great, and you gave white the opportunity to play bishop to f3 and a queen f5. Looks like it's coming into the attack. But I guess there's queen d1 protecting both square on c2 and bishop on f3, and white is barely holding on.
Wow. Okay. And I wonder also, were we able to interpolate in this position knight takes b5 anywhere? Because that's always a question. Probably not, because you could play queen takes g3, right?
Yeah, exactly. And
this wins for black. Okay.
And
that's the thing. There's so much for Dubov to analyze. So both knight g3 and knight f2 very tempting, and that's where Jeffrey's time advantage came into play, because Dubov would have thought longer if he had more time there.
That's right. And we'll come back to this game. We'll see what Jeffrey plays here. But I'm looking at the game between Wonder Liang and Andrei Yesipenko, and a lot has changed there. We see the position is one where Yesipenko has sacrificed an exchange. White has 2 rooks, black has 1. But look at this knight on d4, bolstered by this pawn on c5. I'm guessing that right now, Wonder Liang is thinking, do I sacrifice my rook back for this knight because it's so good, or do I simply protect my rook and try to win from there? But the f5 pawn is loose as well. Not an easy decision.
No, tough situation indeed. Okay, so big time advantage for a Wander, but what to do here?
Yeah, it's a really tough call. I'm looking at this f5 pawn. It's hanging. That would be black's second pawn for the exchange, and that's quite a lot. So rook d to e1 natural, doubling the rooks, but I have to calculate this. If I take on d4 and we get this situation, white is slightly better because the pawn structure is better for white. These are isolated pawns, but it's even material. So probably pretty good chances for black to survive this. And it's got to be a practical choice for a Wonder who is ahead in the clock by 3 minutes, and he brings his rook back.
All right, keep the pawn, or keep the material advantage rather, the exchange. And allow queen takes f5. Well, let's oh, and queen takes f5. So we have transposed into the endgame where black has 1 pawn for the, wait, sorry, two pawns at the moment for the exchange, but white can take on c5, right?
That's right. And g4 is actually a really big threat because the knight has nowhere good to go. So maybe a Wonder calculated this precisely. And if he takes down Yesipenko, who famously beat Magnus Carlsen in Vaikonze, that is huge. Oh, and that looks like a blunder. G5 just gives up the c5 pawn. So a Wonder has fantastic chance at this point to scoop up the pawn and maybe the game.
Yeah, I mean, maybe there was just not that many ways to defend the pawn, because there were also ideas of like rook d5 and rook d1. And like you mentioned, g4. I wonder if Yesipenko thought that he just had to give up the pawn because there was no other option. But in either case, it looks like a Wander going for the win here, which would be huge, Robert. At the beginning of the game, you said that US is not really favored on any board by rating, but this could be an upset that brings US a chance of glory in this match. Let's take a look at some of the other games, because Jeffrey also, after knight takes f2, seemed like he might be defending. But what ended up happening? Knight f2 on the board. Queen f4. Okay,
that is a wonderful choice. I really have to give my respect to Jeffrey for that move, because taking a knight, you're not sure what's happening there. You say, let's just trade the queens up by force, because otherwise the knight is lost. And now it's a situation where maybe white can say, my pawn e3 is hanging, but I can take this bishop on b5. My rook on a7 is excellent. You mentioned that piece before, Jennifer. Without the attack, that rook is well placed. And a4 actually threatens to trap the bishop on b5.
All right, so some practical chances here. What do you do then? a4, oh, rook takes e3. Okay, so now if a4, which was played quickly, you can move the knight, and the knight on c3 is hanging, and the rook on f1 is hanging. So it's just a matter of where to move it to. I don't know. We don't want to take on f4. Then there's rook takes f4. So we got to go somewhere else. What about knight e1?
Oh, I like that. I was saying knight c5. I was retreating. You're going forward. And I think after a takes b5, there's knight takes. Yeah, because you can't take on c3. You lose the knight on e1. So you go knight
take on g2 and then take on c3.
This pawn is a bit scary, but because
it is
threatening all this stuff here, I guess they can't get away with it. So they actually have made some moves. Knight c5 was played instead.
Oh, knight c5 was played. Okay. Yeah, so potentially safer, because I was looking at like b6, b7 in that line, and I got a little scared. So understandably, perhaps Dubov saw the same kind of ideas. And let's see what happens now. So now if pawn takes b5, rook c3, b6, then knight on c5 combined with a rook on b3 do a good job of stopping any funding business.
Exactly. So you could throw in the move b4 first, because now the knight has to move. And I guess you have knight d7, which covers the b6 square so the pawn can't push. And I'm guessing there are going to be mass exchanges here, and there's just not quite enough material left. And that's why the evaluation bar is at zeros, even though I would not call this a draw by any stretch of the imagination.
But it might be a draw. And what an amazingly played game, by the way, Robert, though. I got to give a shout out to both players it's a 15-minute game, and this just feels so rich and so well played by both. So if they do end up drawing, it will be a very excellent result for both players.
That is right. And I'm going to just drag our attention elsewhere for the moment. This position has zeros on the evaluation bar, but I'm looking at the game between Artemiev and Robson. We haven't really looked in there. Artemiev is up a pawn with a beautiful pawn structure. I think objectively, Robson has to be nearly lost at this point because the clean extra pawn, a pawn central mass, and now 2 seconds on the clock for Robson.
Totally agree. This one looks like Robson will go down very likely. So far we've had 3 games where we feel like we might know the result, and it seems like right now it might be even. So we got to check in on Irina's game and Alexandra's game, the women's games, to see whether it's going to be USA or Russia to win the first match. Here's Irina's position. You liked Goryachkina's position earlier, and now it looks like her minor pieces have found a lot of happiness.
Oh yeah, dark square control for black, and then a knight coming into d3 next. Probably a c5 knight, but here it's just a situation where is black also up a pawn? Yeah, it's all across the board. White is struggling.
Knight d3 played, but it is a bullet. Well, it's not really a bullet game because there's a 5-second increment, but with the time this low, anything can happen. But yeah, you got to give respect to Goryachkina's pieces here. Every single one of her minor pieces is better than every single one of White's minor pieces. And, that's just a virtue, I think, of winning that pawn and excellent middle game play.
Yeah, and she did play the move e5, just to go back very quickly before you go back to live position. She went e5, which freed up her control of the dark squares after d5, knight c5, and so on. So it was a thematic plan, and now it's paying off for Goryachkina. Let's go to the game between Nazi Paikidze and Alexander Kostenyuk, because that one has changed quite a lot, and there's tension here. And Nazi has the outside pass pawn. That pawn was isolated. It looked like it could be in trouble. But when she played c4 many moves ago, and White doubled those pawns, that allowed her to actually get an outside pass pawn that she has kept to this point.
Wow, why is she not like this? Looks so great for black, but of course Alexandra hanging in there, playing the move bishop d8, trying to get counterplay. Bishop g7 quickly played by Nazi. Is that a good move? Because now I don't know, is the bishop going to come to g5 and she's going to try to play rook d8 anyway?
She probably will go for that, but I think when you have a minute and 15 seconds, a minute 19 seconds, it's a great move to play. You don't want to have to calculate rook takes d8. You don't want to play the move quickly and get checkmated. So she just plays bishop g7. She knows her king will be okay in the position. The knight on c5 is amazing because it's hard to attack it, and it just hits the e4 pawn. It protects a4. It covers the d7 square, which White would love to move to with the rook. So this is a great position, I would say, for black, though Kostenyuk's lead on the clock may even things out a bit.
I mean, the position looks great for black indeed. I mean, look at that knight on c5. The bishop on f3 is not participating in the action. The pawn on a4 looks great. I don't even understand why the computer evaluation says it's equal, because it looks really good for black. But of course, the computer probably sees some kind of counterplay that's a less intuitive. And maybe Alexandra is finding it because she is such a great player. Look at that move, bishop g5. And again, this rook d8 combination of rook d8 and bishop h6 could create some serious counterplay for White, especially when you think about the idea that, hey, once in a while, a bishop takes h5 will appear in the position.
That's true.
Really excellent play by both players. I think Nazi should maybe stick with this Sicilian.
I agree. I like what's going on here. And I love the move a3 because sometimes the best way to fend off an attack is creating threats of your own. By the way, Goryachkina has officially won her game against Irina Krush, but a3 played. Now rook b2 is an idea. She plays knight e6, covering d8, going to d4. And because the queen's on e2, Jen, there's no more rook d7. This is just fantastic play by Nazi. Rook b2 played. Team USA looking to strike on this board, but there, unfortunately for no rook b6 to defend the rook on b2 because the bishop covers the square. So still some things to work out for Nazi.
So tense. 1 minute for Nazi, playing fantastic. This was a game if Russia was definitely favored on paper, but Nazi is showing that it's as tight as they come here. Okay, Kostyuk trying to figure out what to do here for white. The knight on e6 is so beautiful. And now all of her kind of like aggressive ideas are stymied.
That's true. So I'm really liking the position. I just want to quickly go over some other games. Jeffrey Zhang and Danilo Dubov have drawn. I'm going to flash the game between Artemiev and Robson. It looks like Robson putting up stubborn defense despite the minimal seconds on his clock. It's an extra pawn for white still, but that passed pawn for black is leaving him in the game. D5 play. I think the king will drop back to E7 and D6 to try to get this pawn. And because this pawn on B4, it seems like white doesn't quite have a winning position.
Not dead in the water. Well, that is an achievement, as this looked terrible for Ray a few moves ago. Well, we know he can play well under time pressure, putting the pressure on Artemiev. Can he win this position? Oh. So what's our likely score here then, Robert?
Well, there was just a result in the books, and Nazi Pakidze and Kostyuk have drawn their game by repetition. And I don't think Nazi realized it was going to be a repetition because I caught her reaction off to the side. And it was weird. It didn't happen all in a row. It wasn't just like rook d2, rook d5. Actually, maybe it was at this point. So it was just a repetition of moves between rook d2 and rook d5 and rook b2 and rook b3, and a draw is on the board. And she did not want to draw here. No chance. She did not look very happy about it.
Tough one, you know. I mean, with 50 seconds left on the clock, anything could have happened. But hey, it was a draw. So where does that leave Team USA? With Irina having lost her game, but Ewander Liang was winning earlier. Is he still going to win this game? If he does, and Ray holds a draw, this could be a split match, Robert.
Yes, especially because Talia Cervantes is holding. I'm just going to quickly show that game and come right back here. And this board, even material, queen of 4 pawns, queen of 4 pawns. Maybe white's a little bit better because of the king activity and centralized queen here, but it should be a hold for black, especially given her time. But Ray Robson, he's still fighting. He's down a pawn. The advantage is going up. And that is bad news for Team USA because they desperately need Ray to hold this endgame because Ewander still has good chances.
Well, let's see what happens on Ewander's board because he needs to win for this even to be a factor, right? Because the United States did already lose that key game with Irina Krush. So Ewander has to win or Russia will get it done.
That's correct. And right now, the problem for Ewander is there's bishop and pawn here. So if he can trade a pair of rooks, he'll have to sacrifice his rook for a bishop and pawn and try to win the ensuing endgame. So that's the goal he's looking for. There could be a rook b5 next and a g6 thrown in there. I think that is probably the winning idea at some point. But look at this move by Yesipenko going after the b3 pawn.
All right, trying to keep it juicy. Rookie A check. Don't step on the F file.
No.
All right, so he's played king to d5, but now rook f6. Ooh, this looks like a great move. And how are you going to keep defense of that pawn on f7? You don't.
Yeah, he gives it up to get the past a pawn. The rook will come behind the g pawn. Maybe this a pawn will start running up the board here, but it's a tough call. And now, whoop, there it goes. There's the evaluation bar, heavily in white's favor. G6 played, G7, G8, unstoppable without sacrificing at least the bishop. Jen, it looks like Ewander Liang has found his path to victory.
What a game by the junior board, heavily outrated. And look at his stare right now. Still not showing any emotion, as you know, you don't show emotion until the game is absolutely over in blitz. Let's see if we can get him to crack a smile.
I think once the result is in the books, he will crack a smile because this is a fantastic achievement for the youngster. Yesipenko is one of the best players in the world. He has beaten Magnus Carlsen. He's above 2,700. G8 equals queen. There it is. You take, the rook takes back, and bishop c3 is one move too slow, Jen. You want to get a queen here, but white can bring this rook down to g1 and then stop the pawn from promoting. Otherwise, it's a full extra rook for white.
2 rooks are better than 1. And here we go, as it looks like Yesipenko has resigned himself to defeat here. But that leads us to the other games, Robert, because we still have the Talia game underway and the Ray Robson game, right? It's going to all depend on that. Can Ray Robson hold?
He cannot. This is a winning endgame. We will see the bridge, the Lucena position. Talia Cervantes has drawn with the black pieces against Polina Shuvalova there. So now it's up to Artemiev to convert his winning endgame. This pawn is going. It cannot be stopped, Jen. This is just an easy win at this point.
And great performance by Artemiev. You know, first it seemed like his technique was, starting to be challenged by Ray. But at the end of the day, he is going to get it done. And that's going to mean 2 wins for Russia and just 1 win for the United States. But what a match. I mean, considering how much they were outrated, I think USA showed a very fine performance this round, but will it be enough? Doesn't look like it.
No, unfortunately not for Team USA. Ray put up a great fight considering he's been on the increment for the last however many moves, 30 moves or so. But this is an easy win for somebody like Artemiev. He can bring his king to G8, push his pawn to F7. And even though that looks like it blunders a pawn here, I just want to show it very quickly. Rook takes F7 does not work because you have rook E1 check, and the king has to stay attached to the rook. The rook comes with check and scoops up the rook on F7. That's exactly what's happening, so I don't even need to show it, because Ray might even just resign at this point. Rook F7, rook E1, king F6, rook F1 check, and he's playing a couple moves, but this is over. Vladislav Artemiev gets the crucial win for Team Russia. They win the first leg of this match.
Very well played. What a dramatic match. So many exciting games. What stuck out to you the most, Robert? Which game are you most impressed by?
Somehow this game is still going, by the way. Wonderling is winning, but I thought it was over as well. Now that his king can inch closer, it seems like it's easier. What stood out to me? A few things stood out to me, honestly. Polina Shuvalova, I thought, was the big favorite on her board. She's 2,500 plus IM. Talia Cervantes is a strong player in her own right, but heavily outrated there and had the black pieces. So that's a great result for Team USA. I think that in addition to that, Wonder Liang has to be the hero for Team USA as he works his way to convert this. But for Team Russia, it is Goryachkina winning with the black pieces. Phenomenal results. And Artemiev did his thing against Ray Robson. So nothing really stood out for Russia because I expected them to win as the heavy rating favorites. So I think the surprise was in USA's favor, if you will.
And such a dramatic board one battle, even though it ended in a draw, we really saw kind of like the assets of both players, Jeffrey's practical play, staying ahead on the clock, and Dubov's majestic creativity. And in this particular case, they balanced each other out, but who knows about the next round.
That's right. Both Dubov and Zhang gave it their all. That's why results can be misleading. It was a drawn game, but they were really fighting on that board. Team Russia wins the first leg 3.5, 2.5. That's as close as it gets without being a tie, which means the Team USA has their backs against the wall. They need to win by a score of at least 3.5, 2.5 to send this to tie breaks. Jen, before we go on break, what would you say to Team USA as they look to score that victory to even things up?
More Sicilians, baby.
That's all that needs to be said. Jen and I will be back shortly for the second half of this championship match here at the FIDE Online Olympiad. We had a great first half of the championship match between Russia and USA. But before we get into the second match, we do want to thank our sponsors, without whom this event would not be possible. So for the FIDE Online Olympiad 2021, in particular, we'd like to thank the Shenzhen Longyang District Culture, Radio, Television, Tourism, and Sports Bureau, the Shenzhen MSU BIT University, Shenzhen Chess Academy and Pengcheng Chess Club, the Shenzhen Longyang District People's Government, the Shenzhen Municipal Bureau of Culture, Radio, Television, Tourism, and Sports, and the e-commerce platform Simaland from Russia. Thank you so much for helping host this event. It has been an absolute pleasure.
With unique strength in his
So Jen, we are halfway through the final. Well, maybe not halfway through the final, but at least in terms of rapid chess, we are. Russia leads 3.5, 2.5. You were saying play more Sicilian. That's what Team USA needs, right?
Yeah, we definitely need some. Well, the U.S. team definitely needs some combative positions in order to try to get this and turn it their way. We need to go 3.5, 2.5, and that will force us into a blitz tiebreak match. So can they do it? Well, they did it yesterday against India, Robert.
They did. That's true. That was a crazy bounce back and then a win in the tie breaks. Team Russia, they seem determined. They seem ready. Although that 3.5, 2.5 could have gone the other way in the opening round there. Nazi Pakidze with the black pieces did have the upper hand against Alexander Kostyanyuk before a draw was reached by 3-time repetition. And some of the other boards, a draw here or there could have saved Team USA. So I do think that Russia, they have to be a bit nervous, but they are the stronger team on paper.
That's right. That's right. And I mean, Jeffrey could have gone another way as well. So anything, I mean, it was a draw, but I thought like at some point he looked like he could be on top. So by the way, Robert, you also called the Kazakhstan USA match, and that also involved US losing their first match and then coming back and winning the second match and the tiebreaker. So could this be their pattern?
Well, it's not a pattern that is easy on the heart, that's for sure. John Donaldson, the captain of Team USA, he must be quite stressed at this point, watching the team slug it out. And the lineups change. We've seen that before, where Ray Robson gets the black pieces against whatever super grandmaster he has to face, and then Dariusz Svirch comes in with the white pieces. So I'm guessing we are going to see the same with respect to that. And a big question mark is, will Irina Krush and Nazi Pakidze play again, or will Anna Zatonsky be slotted in to face off against these Russian grandmasters?
Well, I think we see the answer here coming up, right? We've got, it looks like we've got Kostyanyuk versus Krush and Zatonsky coming in versus Lano.
And Katerina Lakhno is in there, replacing Goryachkina. So there's been quite a few switches also on the junior girls board. Garifulina takes the place of Shuvalova there. So Cervantes stays in for Team USA, but a new opponent for her.
Well, Krush versus Kostyanyuk is definitely an epic matchup. I mean, these two have played each other so many times, going back to World Youth Championships, as I think they're a year apart, right? So sometimes they played in that same category as young girls. So this, you can look it up. They've played dozens of games together, I'm sure.
Yes, and when I was coaching the women's national team, Irina Krush beat Alexander Kostyanyuk in their individual matchup, and as USA took down Russia there. But this is a new day. It's a new game, and we'll see how they start out as the games are underway. Let's start at the top here. Jeffrey Zhang on board 1 with the black pieces. He takes the pawn at c4, so we had a queen's gambit accepted, and the players, just like last game, they're going to breeze through their opening moves.
That's right. And then you mentioned that we've got Darius on board 2 now, right?
That's right. And you mentioned in the game between a Wonder and Yesipenko, we had kind of Steinitz. Well, we're getting that right now. Artemiev, known for playing less popular openings, offbeat stuff, he's going that way here with d6, bishop b7 early, and then fianchettoing the bishop on the dark squares. I play this as black growing up, Jen, and I must admit, I played it so many times, and I always liked white's position. So
you play it as black, but you like white's position.
Yeah.
So why do you do that to yourself?
Who doesn't like a good challenge over the board? And the reason why is, look at the pawn center that white has here. Black is playing defensive chess while white gains space here in the center. And I don't have an answer for the why. So I'm just going to talk about the nuance of the position. It just always felt to me that I was struggling to gain space from the black side of this position.
I have a recommendation for you, Robert.
Sicilian?
did you guess?
It was a lucky guess. You're probably right. That would be more suitable if I'm not enjoying the lack of space. And you can just see here, white, it says in the eval bar plus 0.7. That's a sizable advantage. And the reason why is just the great control of the center. You can play d5, start pushing more pawns to c4. And this knight often comes to d2, to f1, and then jumps into g3 even. So it's a journey, but white really can't struggle at all, at least not in the early stages.
Yeah, and it's a bishop on g7 in combination with the pawn on e5 can sometimes be a little awkward. I prefer the bishop on g7 with the pawn on c5.
Mm-hmm. You want an open line.
Well, but yeah, I mean, there are some hurdles for white to deal with though, like because you haven't developed most of your pieces yet, right? So you've got only 2 pieces developed, and black has all their pieces developed. So that's a kind of thing about the Roy Lopez that I think sometimes goes underappreciated, that white does have a very luxurious setup. So sometimes they fall too behind on development.
That's right. Although I don't know if I'd call the bishop on d7 very developed, and the bishop on g7 staring into its own pieces. That's the struggle I was at. I'm like, yes, 4 pieces out to my opponent's 2, but they're not doing as much as they could because white has such a grip on the position. But actually, there's a really great start to the game between Yesepenko and Onwenu Liang. So I want to head over there quickly. I see there's a French defense. I won't make any comments about that, but there's a rook on h3. So I love a good rook lift. And it's clear that that rook may come to g3 to apply pressure on g7, or before this pawn went to h6, the rook could have had dreams of going to f3 and attacking the f7 square.
All right. Well, do you even, as the rook on h3 is looking to potentially g3, as you mentioned, and obviously black has some sinister ideas of his own.
That's
right. Onwenu Liang coming off a fantastic victory, an upset victory, playing extremely combatively again, right? But b4, okay, b4, allowing en passant. Robert, what do you think?
I wasn't expecting b4, and the point I was going to make before the pawn chain went from 4 to 3 is that in a position like this, and I drew an arrow for black, and then for white the same, you tend to attack in the direction of your pawn chain. So black is trying to make inroads on the queen side, white is trying to do the same on the king side. So it's kind of a battle of 2 flanks. And the move b4 says, I'm not just going to be bullied on the queen side. If you take en passant, I will take with the knight. And if you play a move like bishop a4, which is what scared me at first glance, I'm now realizing that this gets very tactical, and knight takes a5 is possible here. The queen's under attack, the rook is hanging, the knight can be recaptured. You can't take the rook without losing your bishop with check, so that's out of the question. It'd be 2 minor pieces for the rook. And if you take the queen, after rook takes b6, pawn takes b6, I imagine there's this like move knight takes b7 and knight d6 check, and bishop b5 is almost checkmate here, Jen. This is more tactical than I bargained for at this stage of the game.
Oh, that's really cool. Love it. That's a cool line. So you're forced to play knight c6 to stop it from being checkmate.
Right.
Hysterical. Good night on v7 indeed. So b4, surprising move. By the way, Robert, where was the first place you learned that the pawn is pointing in the direction that you want to attack? Was that a coach, or did you read that from a book?
It definitely was not from a book. I am ashamed to admit I didn't read too many chess books, but I had a great coach in Miron Scher who, that was one of the things that he would mention. That pawns, you look at the pawn chains and then you want to focus your energy that way often. So that's the case in this game. Although the pawn chain got shorter for both sides, it got shorter in different ways. White's base pawn has changed from b2 to c3, whereas black has the same base pawn, but lost the pawn that was sticking out the furthest. And the bad news for black there is the bishop come to d3. The bad news for white is the pawn on c3 is easier to target. So these changes have different impacts. And I actually kind of like black's position at this point.
You like black's position because queen c7 just played. Looking again, there's this idea of bishop a4, but it could be met by bishop b5 check, right? But now that the queen's on c7, c3 will hang in the end of that line. So white needs to watch out for that. By the way, I also heard about the pawn finger thing, and I read it in my system. I think that's like one of the only things I remember from my system. I believe I read it there at least. So.
Well, at least you knew it. That's the important part. It doesn't have to remember. You don't remember where it came from. And something about this position that's unique, Jen, is that white can't castle. Both rooks have gone on journeys here, so your king is either stuck in the center or will have to wander over to one side or the other. So this is a very strange start to the game.
That's true. The rooks are in strange positions and are not even connected. But look at this move, knight d2. Okay, there's a couple things with that knight. The one thing it does, and you'll see this a lot in these Frenches, is that the queen on d1 is now released to perhaps post up on a very threatening square, whether it's h5 or g4. And it also hints at the possibility of maybe playing c4 one day, connecting those two rooks.
That's true, especially if you castle queenside. I'm trying to open up the position so c4 becomes a threat. And as you mentioned before, it was good of you to point it out. Bishop a4. You can now play bishop b5 check because the rook on h3 defends the c3 pawn. So there's that in mind. Although because the eval bar went up so high, I know that there's a tactic. Rook takes b7. I wasn't thinking in that way, but the eval bar helps. The point is, if you take the queen on d1, I take the queen on d7, I win a pawn. And if you take the rook, I take your bishop with check, and your king is getting stuck in the center because bishop b5 as a follow-up is devastating. So
that's right. So you sacrifice an exchange here, but the king is dust. So yeah, nice spot, Robert, as bishop a4 was not played, knight c6 instead. And what a fascinating game we have on tap. Now you see that knight not only releases the bishop on f8, but also could go to a5 itself and stop all of your ideas of playing c4. Queenside castles could even come into the position. But here's the thing about castling queenside. You might think, well, then the rook on h3 is going to look really silly, but actually the rook can still try to like win f7. Like even if your king's not there, like you still have stuff to worry about on that side of the board.
that's true. And the rook on b3 is happy to see the king come this way. Although castle queenside, I would not be opposed to seeing black do that, because if the king does in fact go that way, f6 becomes an option, which it no longer is. Although knight takes d4. Big blunder by Yesepenko.
No.
Oh, that's huge for Team USA. A Wonder Liang is a different player. I'm telling you, the last 2 days, something has just clicked for him. He struggled against Kazakhstan, lost both games against a player he was higher rated than. But when the opponents got stronger, he has risen to the challenge. He immediately spots the blunder because the queen on d1 had an important duty that I wasn't looking at either. And the bishop on c1 is unprotected. So he steals a pawn on d4, e5, excuse me, I'll draw my arrows better. e5 now is weak. And if you take on d4, queen takes c1, you lost a pawn for nothing.
So how does white now, Yesepenko, how does he try to keep it interesting? Because I don't think he wants to allow that queen to evade on c1. Is there another move for him? Because e5 is also potentially in capture. So like, suppose I move my rook somewhere. Where did I even move it to, Robert? Rook b2, rook b1. And now, yeah, exactly. I guess I have to move it all the way back to b1 to protect c1, because then at least I'm threatening c takes d4 again, right? But now the question is, if you were to move your pawn to g6 or something, oust my queen, then you're going to take e5 as well.
This is as bad as it gets. You can also just play knight c2 check and then take this pawn over here, like if nothing else.
Yeah, maybe he does have to take. Wait, what did we say about taking on d4?
You're just down a pawn and miserable because you have to trade queens as well. You have to play queen d1 here.
Yeah, but maybe this is better than the alternative because, like, okay, you have some. I mean, I'm not saying you have compensation, but you don't have compensation, but you do have an open file, and you can try to defend this position, right?
Yes, the fact that you're not completely lost already means that it's better to do that than to move the rook. I agree. It just is a huge blunder. Yesepenko, I think you can see him on screen here. He looks miserable, and Wonder Liang still focused. He needs to win this game with the black pieces, mind you, to take down the Russian superstar and help his team have a chance here. So let's go to some of the other boards, because it does seem like a Wonder should have great winning chances. He's pretty much already winning this game, and if he can convert,
amazing. Huge. And the takeaway, guys, is loose pieces. That bishop on c1 was loose, and I actually think that maybe Yesepenko hallucinated because perhaps he was thinking about playing queen to g4. Notice that the queen to g4 instead of queen h5, this wouldn't have worked, right? Because then knight takes d4, there's queen takes d4.
The issue being, though, that queen h4 doesn't threaten anything. Queen h5 threatened the f7 pawn to stop castling. So he probably thought, oh, I have to stop the castling queenside. But here, castle queenside, black is still doing better. But you're right. It did defend the pawn on d4. He just wanted to make an active move, and he's paying the price for it. And after knight takes d4. So let's go to the game between Irina Krush and Alexander Kostyanyuk. You mentioned longtime rivals. Look at this position, Jen. This is really exciting where the black king is on h8. The pawn structure is a bit compromised, but Irina's saying, hey, that's actually a good pawn structure for me because my rook has a semi-open file.
What a game. Yes. And, I think if Russia looked at the result on the Esopenko board and looked at this position, they might be saying, what about Goryachkina? I'm surprised they did not play her in this round, Robert, as, what we're seeing so far is looking very promising for USA.
I would have a hard time ever sitting Goryachkina. She's that good of a player. Of course, Lakhno and Kostyanyuk, amazing players in their own right. In this position, it's really interesting because look at White's pieces. All of them are centralized. Every single piece, except for some of the pawns, of course, are centralized here. But look what Black has done. This is a solid pawn structure. If you're going to break through, you need to sacrifice material to break through. And it is Black's turn, and Irina is thinking here, trying to figure out the best plan. Just don't be fooled, because this rook could, in a moment's notice, swing over to h3. And this queen, speaking of queen h5, that queen h5 move can happen. So it's not going to lead to checkmate. Irina is in a good position to fend it off, but she needs to find a few precise moves because her pieces aren't fully coordinated the way she'd like them to be.
And that's why she's behind on time. And yeah, it does look like this position is just wild, could go anyway. And you make a good point, Robert. Between Kostyanyuk, Lano, and Goryachkina, you definitely have murderer's row for the Russian women, and choosing 2 out of the 3 is never easy. I guess the reason I was surprised was because Goryachkina won so convincingly with black pieces, right? Sometimes you want to kind of like build on that psychological edge and play them again against the player that they just beat, right?
It's a good point, and maybe it's a stylistic thing or an opening thing where Kostyanyuk, they want to give her the white side of some Sicilian here. But I think for Irina right now, it's a tough choice because this bishop is not hanging, the queen's under attack. Do you move the queen away somewhere to c7 to hit the f4 pawn, or to b6 to hit the rook and apply pressure down to b2, or to a5 to be as advanced in the diagonal as possible and maybe have some more ideas on the queen side? So
let's try one of them. What about queen b6? Let's just see how this plays out. As you mentioned, all of these potential threats, d4, b2, and of course, we're just trying to capture the bishop on c4 as well. So do we have time as Kostyanyuk to play a move like rook h3 going for the attack, or do you just take our bishop, right? Because you always have rook g7.
Exactly. So there's no time to go all in. And I was looking at this bishop on e7 because that's a loose piece, just like we saw in the Esopenko game. So if you take back after bishop takes d5, well, the bishop is undefended. So you do have the move bishop c5. It gets very complicated because white takes a rook, black does the same. But look at what Irina did. She notices that this bishop on e7 could be loose, and that's why e takes d5 is such. So she plays bishop d6, and now Kostyanyuk quickly plays e5, and now Irina's on the clock once again. So the best thing that Kostyanyuk has done today is put pressure on the clock because she's up so much time, and it didn't go her way against Nazi Pekidze, who actually had the better position at the time of 3-move repetition. Here, though, it's super unclear. The king in the corner. If you take on e5, pawn takes e5, now you have to worry about f7. The bishop could come to d3 to help in an attack. I do not know how to evaluate the position. Zeros is one of those things where the computer's taking a cop out here. They don't know either.
That's right. Well, Robert, I really have to give Kostyanyuk so many props for playing so quickly in such exciting positions. And she's a great lover of chess, so I'm sure it's difficult because this position's so interesting. But she's so disciplined. She knows from a practical point of view, it's better to play fast, so she just goes with it. It's harder than you think, If you love the game and you love the Sicilian, you want to kind of sink in and look at all the different possibilities. But right. We saw her do the exact same thing against Nazi, and it did play out. I don't know. Did it play out in her favor? She got the draw, but she also got a really bad position. So I don't know. It can really go either way.
Although this is a different type of Sicilian position where the king can be attacked, whereas the game against Nazi was more closed. King safety was not an issue. And here, taking on e5, I was about to say, Jen, I wasn't sure if you should take on e5 or just push the bishop back, retreat it to c7, because the f6 pawn won't be captured. And maybe you need to have this move f5 in your back pocket at some point to fend off the attack. But instead we see a capture, bishop to c5, rook h3, queen g5 check. Oh, you don't want that pawn. This is not what the position is about. You do not want this pawn.
I see what you mean, Robert, though, because there's also that F file pressure that isn't as palpable if Black has the idea of playing F5 themselves. But let's look. Let's suppose, I know it makes you squirm, but what does happen after Queen takes G2, Robert? Just Queen H5, and then you have to play what, like
Queen G6, and then I'm just gonna play Queen H4, I think. Like I have so many threats here with Rook G3, the F6 square, and this bishop is hanging. Jen, we can take it at any moment, but as soon as you take it, in comes the knight to join the party. So actually in the live position, you can take on C4, but the idea is knight E4. Where's your queen going? Because the bishop and the queen are under attack. If you take
it would have to go to E7, right?
Or E7 or E5. I think I would take on E5 just to eliminate the idea of knight to F6, but I think Rook H5 is the idea. Oh, I think this is amazing. Rook H5 hits the queen and bishop in a row, and F5 seems to take care of everything, but F5 takes away the queen's access to G5, and knight G5 is so nice.
That's right, knight G5, queen takes E2, rook takes H7, checkmate on the board, and that is a very uncommon checkmate. Usually you see the queen doing that work, but the rook on G8 blocks the escape square that the king would normally have on G8.
Wow. I mean, that would be, she did take on C4. This is something that could possibly happen. Knight E4 quickly played by Kosteniuk. Look at Irina's clock, 3.5 minutes. Her king's in danger. Queen's under attack. This bishop on C5 is under attack. Queen takes E5. Oh my gosh, we're going to see this?
I think so. I mean, Kosteniuk, great tactician. And there it is. It looks like she's played it, Robert. So after rook H5, if Irina's right, Irina will see F5, knight G5. And then what will she play instead? Because Black is momentarily up a piece, right? So can she just give up C5 and live to tell the tale?
So a move like Queen G7, for example, Rook takes C5. You can even play Rook G5 in some positions, but Rook takes
I know.
C5
you have other options besides Rook takes C5, you know? You can even play Knight G5 there, but yeah, I guess you would have H6 in that scenario. And yes, this looks great for White, but currently the material is Black's actually up a pawn, but it doesn't really count because those C-pawns don't count.
The C-pawns, the bishop's bad, the king is unsafe here, the knight is wonderful, about to hop into D6. I mean, this is really as bad as it gets for Irina here, and the clock situation doesn't help. So this actually, no, it has not happened. Rook H5 is the last move. That was my analysis. And we'll see if Irina can find a move here. The position is that bad right now for Black.
And by the way, we should point out that F5, knight G5, the cool thing is that, if you try a move like rook takes G5, there's queen takes E5 with check, and that just ends the game. So not only it's a discovered attack and it's a checkmate threat at the same time. So it's like a discovered attack and a double attack.
And check this out. If queen here, queen E5 is probably the best move. Because you want to give up the queen and checkmate on H7, and H6 doesn't help because rook H6 is checkmate, the queen is pinned. This is a beautiful tactile sequence for Kosteniuk, and this is bad news for Team USA as Irina dips under 2 minutes. It's a 10-minute lead on the clock. It is an overwhelming advantage. Oh my gosh, F5 has happened.
Oh, and she didn't see it. Knight G5. Knight G5 is going to come. Is there anything she saw there, Robert? Maybe she thinks after knight G5 she can do queen G7 and survive. But as you point out, queen E5 is the move. Don't play rook takes H7.
No,
and just get a measly, queen for a knight and a rook. This would actually be very playable for Black unless you can win all my pieces.
Exactly. So you see the eval bar go down to near 0 in the event of that position. But right now, knight G5. There's no other move, I think. I guess rook takes H7. If you switch your move order, you win the queen. But this is what you were just talking about, Jen, where Black has 2 bishops and a rook for the queen. The king's not getting checkmated. So this is what Irina would love to see. But unfortunately for her, it's not happening. Knight G5, instant replay on the board. Rook H7 is mate. The queens are staring each other down. What a game.
And I think this is it. I think that Irina thought that queen G7, maybe she can survive, but forgot about that beautiful move, Robert, that you pointed out, queen E5, saying, I don't want to win material. I want the big guy.
Mm-hmm. And this one is over. So Alexander Kosteniuk is going to take this one. Still, Irina Krush is going to think, try to find something. But
oh, Queen C7, by the way, same thing, except forcing, right?
That's even nicer. I guess you have Rook G7 here, but check this out. Rook D8 check. Queen takes, oh, free rook. Rook takes H7 check. Your rook is pinned. Your king goes here, and Queen G7 is check. This is seriously one of the nicest tactical sequences that I've seen in a while.
A really nice one for anybody watching here who has students or who is just trying to get a hang of some of these tactics herself. The cool thing about this is I think it's like 50 tactics in like a 5-move sequence. So you can really work on your game.
And you called it. Queen C7 was played. We see Kostyanyuk on screen there. She looks ready to win this game after Queen C7, Queen E5 check. I think we will see that exact line with Rook G7, Rook D8 check, winning the game.
Beautiful, beautiful. And there it is. Queen E5 check on the board. Queen takes E5, Rook H7 mate. I don't even know if that mate has a name. We could call it the Kostyanyuk. Rook G7 has been played. And now you could play Rook H7 right away, but there is Rook D8 check. And precise.
I think the eval bar is confused because this is forced checkmate, but I think it's looking at something less convincing. I don't know what it sees, but it's checkmate by force. I don't know if they give a brilliancy prize in this event. I think they do, but if I had a vote, which I do not, it would be this game right here, especially considering the stakes. Rook H7, Queen G7 checkmate. That has happened. The game is over. Alexandra Kostyanyuk gets a huge point for Team Russia.
And let's see, yeah, she just let out a big smile as, you know, Irina, of course, is frustrated, but she's been such an incredible boon to the US squad, winning that clutch game yesterday against Humpy Hinaru. But today, Kostyanyuk's preparation was just too much to handle, and her brilliance in the Sicilian. Very well done.
Her hot streak just continues. She was a wrecking ball at the Women's World Cup, which she won, and she beat Goryachkina, she beat Muzichuk, she beat so many strong players along the way, and she just won't stop. She can't stop, won't stop, and that's why you see a checkmate on the board, this king side torn to shreds. And let's go over to her teammate, Katerina Lochno here, because this is an opposite colored bishop's position. Anna Zatonski thrown into the mix here, trying to get one for Team USA. This looks like a pretty balanced game to my eyes, Jen.
Yeah, that's right. Bishops of opposite color can accentuate the attack, but this is actually kind of like a in between a middle game and an end game, right? Because there aren't that many pieces on the board. Sure, we got our heavies, but nothing else. And so I think that you can imagine some trades kind of going to get more drawish.
Yeah, and I would say that the slight favoritism for black that the eval bar has, it makes sense. The bishop on c4 just isn't as good as the bishop on e5. This pawn on d5 is a passed pawn, but it's an isolated pawn that can't go anywhere. 1, 2, 3 pieces stopping its progress. But watch out, because you may think d6 is an impossibility, but that's when you actually miss it the easiest. d6 opens the queen up to the b7 square. It opens the bishop up to the f7 square. So d6 remains an idea despite the fact that it loses a pawn. So just, you do not want to allow that in many positions.
Yep. Don't think anything is impossible unless it's illegal, right? So bishop h2 check on the board. And now we're going to see king h1, hinting at the idea of playing g3 and trapping the bishop. So really the bishop's just going to go right back out, probably to f4, gaining a tempo. And there it is.
That's instructive though, right? Where you throw in a check just to put the king in a slightly worse position. And why is it worse on h1? In the event of a true endgame, the king would like to be in the action, not in the corner. So this position still remains about balance. Lochno has a big lead on the clock though. Let's go to some of the other games. Yesipenko and Wonder Liang we saw was a French. We liked black's position earlier. And look at this last move, Jen. I just saw it at the corner of my eye. Knight g6. Please, please take me, right? That's a free knight, is it not?
Take it. No. That was a nice little trick, but this would actually be now losing. And it is very aesthetic, Robert, because if you could just slide that H pawn off the board, we could play bishop H6, right?
That's right.
Really sweet little configuration there, but it's not going to save the day as the Wonder Liang's position has only gotten better since we last seen it. So, wow, what an incredible result this would be if he does indeed win this game to go 2-0 against Yesipenko. I mean, incredible.
And this is one of these positions where bishops are kind of frustrating because the knight can go from color complex to color complex, like hit the e6 pawn. But it's very useful that black has this extra pawn on the queen side. You might use it as a decoy, just try to create a passed pawn there, move this king away from the d4 pawn, and that could be the way to actually win this game. Play b5, a5, put your bishop on e3, and then play b4 to distract the king away from the pawn. And this pawn will also be running up the board as well. So it should be a win for a wonder here. He plays the calm move a6. He's also up 8 minutes on the clock. What a performance by Wonder Liang.
Yeah, indeed. An incredible performance. A wonderful. And that will make it 1-1, right, Robert? If we've got Kostenyuk winning the game against Crush, and it looks like Wonder Liang is going to score one for the USA. So it'll all come down to the other 4 games, which so far we saw Satansky Lana looking pretty balanced. And how about our board 1 battle?
Whoa. Okay. I don't care what the evaluation bar says here. I look at this pawn on c3. It makes me a little bit nervous. But then I do a quick count on material. White is up a pawn. So black has the best pawn on the board, but white has an extra pawn. And queen c4 play. The king's on e8. All right. I'm going to actually say the evaluation bar, it makes sense. I'm liking white's position here.
The king is a little dicey, that black king on e8. So I think that this, with only 3 minutes on the clock for each player, is going to be another wild one. And it's always so fun to watch world-class players play with so little time on the clock. So this is going to be a treat, no doubt. So rook a4 just played. What did Jeffrey do here? I mean, notice that there's that knight hanging on f3, right? So we could play bishop takes f3. Is that a good move?
I kind of like it, just ruining the pawn structure. And white can decide whether or not to throw in rook takes d8. I'm not sure how much of a difference it makes. But let's say we take on f3, we take on d4, we get this position. It is so important that this bishop covers the c2 square, right? The bishop is saving white from facing a black pawn promoting here. And you can take on d4 with the queen because of it, and the bishop protects. This knight is in some trouble. And it says that it's more or less not too bad for black. And I'm guessing that's because some of the queenside possibilities where you may give up your c3 pawn, win the a4 pawn, and then try to rush that pawn up the board. The white will remain a pawn ahead with the safer king.
Well, this one too early to tell, could go any of the 3 ways. Do note that at this point in the match, Russia is going to start thinking, well, hey, I mean, draws aren't too bad, right? As they do need a draw 3-3 in this match will catapult them to gold medals, right? So there's a lot at stake here. They could get that sense, but we have to look at the other boards to say whether that would even be a good idea. How is Artemiev doing?
I just actually looked at that game and I saw that the move g4 had been played. You said solid, you said 3-3. Artemiev says, hey, let's go for the attack here. And he needs to, because if we look at the state of the board here, white has 7 pawns, black has 6, extra pawn for white. And so you can't just sit and do nothing. You need to cause some problems for white. And g4 does just that. You're hitting this pawn on h3. And if you take, it takes the f pawn, which I like, but had he just taken once, let's say, because you want to keep your pawns in a chain, black's going to play queen h4. Black's going to play g3 and go checkmate your king. So that's why the pawn was captured twice on g4. And after bishop takes g4, this knight on d2, not the best piece. We've seen that many times, Jen. You pointed this out, where the knights can be placed in better squares. And that's why knight f3 was the first move played.
Yeah, knight f3 makes sense. And it makes perfect sense. The demand of the position for Artemiev is to play for the win, to play aggressively. But I think it's really instructive for people watching at home, as there is that famous cliche, the best way to play for a draw is to play for a win.
It's true.
And of course, the logic behind that is that if you actually consciously play for a draw and start playing like passive moves, then little by little, your position will get really bad. And you'll end up losing the game.
That's right, because you're not thinking about the full board, you're thinking about the results, and that's not objective, and chess is an objective game. So king g7 played, rook h8, queen h6, you need to watch out for that. You would love to trade queens because you're up a pawn, but notice that the rook is dragged back to c3, which would drop the b4 pawn. So you wouldn't be up a pawn anymore. In fact, you'd probably go down a pawn there. So white trying to figure out, can I get my queen to d4? I wish I could move like a knight. Let's trade off those queens. That's why I like to move queen d3, going closer to the white king, maybe going for queen d4. And from d3, I'm spying on this a6 pawn as well. So I think that would be a good start for Dariush.
what about rook c6? Oh, you need to hold on to the d4 square.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly, right?
Because I was looking at like e5, maybe e5 and rook c6.
Getting tactical here.
I'm trying to just take a look at it. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely not necessary, but just keeping my eye on those ideas as white, because I have more time. I have the luxury to think a little bit about that. And it seems like Darius is doing just that right now, considering his options. He's got twice as much time as Artemiev, and he's got, and did he play rook c6?
He did play rook c6, so he
But
does not mind that check here.
So what's going on there? Let's take a look. Bishop f3. I rejected this because of queen d4 check, but I guess at the end of the day, your king on g7 could be a little lonesome. So, but where do we put our king here, Robert? Because if we put it on the h file, you have rook h8 check, which looks like a disaster. So you got to go to f1.
Yeah, and then your point about the king on g7, that's not exactly the safest king either.
True. This is king f1, surprisingly safe. Both the c4 and the b3 squares are very well covered, so you don't have to worry about any of that. I mean, rook takes b4.
So rook b4, starting
with rook b4. Okay,
I think that's a smart move.
Yeah, that looks smart because now the d6 square is currently covered. Although
I mean, still queen g4 check played, and your e5 move is definitely not out of the question, but queen g6 played to avoid that, because if you made a move like king to h8, for instance, e5 is super strong. You can't take with the pawn. It's pinned. You certainly can't take with the rook. You get checkmated here very quickly. So e5, your idea brought up earlier, still in the cards.
And that's why queen g6 instead was played. But does this mean we go into an endgame and take on d6? But a4 is in take as well. So
yeah, so takes, I think pawn takes, rook takes d6, and you could maybe even take on e4, but I think taking on e4 makes sense.
Yeah, so that you avoid the line with e5, right, and having to counter the pawn duo there.
And just to show the end.
Yeah, I like this a lot better.
It's an extra pawn for white, so this is serious winning chances for Darius. Even if the computer says zeros, yeah, you see everything perfect. I get it. Stop making us all feel bad. This is not that easy when the pawns are split and you have to play precisely. But we actually are seeing this exact sequence here. Rook takes a6 played, and it looks like Artemiev should be able to hold the draw. He is a great endgame player.
We'll see. As Darius will try to get it done. It looks like it might come down to Talia Cervantes versus Garofalina playing for the Russia team coming in. And we haven't looked at that game in a while, I don't think.
Not good news for Team USA.
Ooh, those bishops look juicy.
Yeah, you can grab this here, and after rook takes, your bishop's under attack, as is this one. But bishop c6 looks very strong because there's checkmates in the corner. The a4 pawn is weak and targeted. I think that black is going to go up 2 full pawns on the queen side, and they should be unstoppable.
Well, that's going to be really bad news for the United States, because I think they'd have to win a lot of points to counter that, especially with Zitansky Lano looking like it might be on the more drawish side.
Yeah, I'll pull that one up to show it's a situation where now Zitansky's down a pawn. So you can just trade queens and say, I'll never lose this position. But Lucknow's going for more.
Yeah, and I don't blame her, because she doesn't know exactly how all the other games are going to pan out. Plus, her opponent only has 13 seconds left.
Whoa, that's crazy. What else is great? Look at this. Dubov against Zhang. Then she did just trade queens. The pawn's on h7 here, and the eval bar says, oh, black is doing fine. It happened so quickly here. Queen takes knight to make room for the next queen. And we're here, and Jeffrey has some winning chances. White should hold this game. There probably will be endless checks, but because black has this outside pawn, if white does not secure the draw, which he actually is about to, because king f8, queen check here, queen g5,
yeah.
you just go like this back and forth, and the king can't escape. But black would be the one with winning chances.
That geometric checks is going to save the day for Dubov, and that's an important draw for Team Russia. As it looks like they are doing so well on the women's boards, really.
And look at that. Jeffrey plays king f6. He knows he needs to win. He sees the results on the other boards. He has 20 seconds left. He's at no risk of losing unless he walks into some kind of checkmate, which he won't. But it looks like with the move f4, there are too many checks for the black king to escape.
That's right. Yeah, f4, nice move. Insisting on getting those dark square checks. Hey, It's not as good as the A pawn, but it is useful to have an extra pawn on the king side after all.
That's right. It's a draw here by force. Queen e5 check. The king comes back to e7. You go back to c7, and you always have this geometric idea that we were talking about before. Queen d8 to g5 to h5. The king goes to the h files. This is now going to be a repetition. Artemiev and Dariush Svirch. Dariush needs to win that game. He was looking like he had some chances. If we go back to it, as this game ends in a draw, oh, there's some tricks here, aren't there? If you take with the rook on d6 in 9 seconds, this rook comes over here and can swing around with checks. He takes with the king, but rook g7, still possible, trying to push the pawn and get g5, bring the king in. Black needs to play accurate. 6 seconds. 5, 4, you need to move. Wait, that's a free pawn. You can't take on a6.
Rook a6 won't be possible.
Uh-oh. No time for Artemiev, and this could be huge for Team USA.
This gives us a chance. This gives the United States team a chance. By the way, Jeffrey Zhang officially did draw on the top board.
That's right. And it looks like Anna Zatonski and Lochno are going to draw. And if Talia can hold that game where she is in trouble, then this, if it's decisive, would send it to tie breaks. But right now, it looks like Artemiev bringing his king up here, Jen. I guess white
good play.
White win.
Yeah, it's good play, and the time has equalized as well as Artemiev has picked up some seconds with some accurate and quick play. Well, if that's the case, it would mean Zatonski would have to win, or Talia would have to win somehow in order for this to go into tiebreak.
Yeah, that is almost certainly not going to happen. And I'll pull those games up. G5 played by Lochno here. It's an obstacle bishop endgame where black is up a pawn, so Anna Zatonski has no winning chances. And for Talia against Leia here, ooh, gosh, it's just going from bad to worse for Talia. Unfortunately, the bishops are too strong here. Another extra pawn for Team Russia, and rook b3, I think, just ends it on the spot because you can't take on e4. Bishop takes e3 check would win material. Otherwise, everything gets traded off. Black is winning this game.
Great move, great game played here. And wow, what a nice performance by Talia throughout playing for the United States. But this game, unfortunately for her, she is going to go down, and I think this will spell victory for Team Russia if indeed Black does get the game.
And Black certainly is getting the game. This pawn is a decoy. The Black king will come up and win the pawns on the king side while this king goes over the queen side. So actually, Dariush and Artemiev drew, so a win isn't even necessary for Team Russia because they're tied 2-2, and they are going to win the match and win the gold medals. And I have to say, what a performance by Team Russia. It's a nerve-wracking situation. You never know what can happen in a single game, even as rating favorites, but they held steady. And a wonder Liang, I mean, an absolute heroic performance for Team USA, but wasn't enough, unfortunately, for the Americans.
That's right. I mean, a heroic performance overall for the Team USA. Getting really the big upset win yesterday over India and showing what they could do with this team. Very impressive. But hey, Russia, even more impressive today.
And this one is officially over. Leia Garifulina wins, and that means Team Russia wins the gold medal no matter the result of Anna Zatonski and Katerina Lochno, even though this game is an easy draw. So that means Russia wins, and you have to be happy for Team Russia because last year there was this whole situation where there were disconnections and both Russia and India were handed gold medals. And I'm not trying to make a claim of who deserved what, but it was uncomfortable. Neither team was super happy. India was ecstatic because they win a gold medal. Russia, they're the perennial favorites. They always are competing for the gold medal. They want to win. So it was just a feeling that things could have gone differently. Now there are no question marks, no asterisk. Team Russia wins the FIDE Online Olympiad, and they clearly deserve it with a powerful performance, beating China in both matches, beating Team USA in both matches, and should be pandemonium in Russia.
Very, very fantastic result indeed. No question marks, only exclamation points today, and particularly a lot of exclamation points for one Alexandra Kostenyuk, who won an incredible white Sicilian game against Irina Krush. And so all of my advice throughout the broadcast about why you should play the Sicilian, of course, countered by this game is white played a brilliant win. And okay, that's something that you live with when you play the Sicilian. You live by it and you die by it, right? And unfortunately for Irina in this game, she died by the Sicilian.
And how quickly it turned, because we entered the position right at this moment. I have to show this again.
Yeah.
It was a position where black not fully coordinated, the queen side not helping out, but white just aiming everything in the center, though black looks very solid with the pawns. Bishop d6, pawn e5. And I think this was a moment maybe where Irina probably would like to take it back, dropping the bishop to c7, so later you can play f5. It might shield your king at a certain moment. So taking here opened everything up, and look at white's pieces go. The rook, she got tempted by what looks like a hanging bishop. The queen is no longer attacked on the d file because that pawn was pinned, but knight e4, hitting the queen and bishop. Queen takes e5, rook h5, hitting the queen and bishop. And unfortunately, f5 does not solve black's problem, because knight g5, a beautiful queen sacrifice, because rook takes h7 is checkmate. The queen tried to defend, but queen e5, check, please take me. That's mate again. Rook g7, don't mind if I sack a rook now. Taken. Rook takes h7, pinning and winning. And finally, queen takes g7, check and mate. I'm telling you, Jen, this has to be the game of the tournament.
I love this game. It gives us so much entertainment, and just love the attacking style there. Knight g5, a move to remember, and kind of a reminder to everyone: don't cash in your chips too early, right? She could have just won Irina's queen. No, she was going after checkmate. And not only did she win the game, but she won it so quickly. And you can't underestimate the importance of that in a team event, right? Because it takes a lot of pressure off of your teammates.
That's correct. You and I both have played in these team tournaments before. And when you see one of your teammates struggling, it puts more pressure on you if you're on the side with a deficit, because now you're like, I can't just play an even position. I need to take risks, and that can backfire. So for Alexander Kostenyuk to play so quickly and with a devastating attack, a blistering attack, that helped Russia more than just the full point. So a great performance by her. And Irina had a good day yesterday, but today was not her day.
Wow. And, just thinking back about this incredible tournament, Robert, and how many teams were competing. I mean, I just saw it flash all the different divisions, and now we're left with our champion, Russia. But look at all of these teams that competed throughout the month. And, big kudos to all the sponsors and to chess.com and to FIDE for pulling this off online, because it really was a fantastic event. Just really generating so much enthusiasm, harnessing all that energy that had been released from the chess boom, right? All of these teams, so many new, young and hungry players, so many veterans who'd been studying more than ever over the last year, all getting to kind of show their stuff. But it was a Russian team that prevailed and came out on top. And not a surprise, but very inspiring nonetheless.
Yeah, I certainly want to reiterate that it is amazing to see so many countries from around the globe send their players. It's great to see unfamiliar names have a chance at the spotlight. But for now, Jen and I are going to go on a quick break, because when we return, we will have interviews with some players from the winning team, that is Team Russia. We'll be right back.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to our coverage of the online Olympiad. And we do have our winners, Team Russia. Big congratulations, our gold medalists. And we have Alexandra Kosteniuk, a huge star today with her dazzling win over Irina Krush, as well as Grandmaster Alexander Motlev, who is the captain. So big congratulations to you both. We actually heard some celebrations going on in the background. Alexander, tell us a little bit about the day and your spectacular victory against Irina Krush.
Yes, well, hello everyone. Thank you for congratulations. Of course, we are very, very happy. Well, to tell you the truth, we expected the final against India. We were getting ready because it felt like, you know, we have some things that need to be resolved from the last year, and it was going to this final. And but then suddenly, the Team USA managed to win on tiebreak yesterday, and we managed to win anyway, although the first match especially was a very tough one for us. Of course, I wasn't able to follow all the games. Probably Alexander can share like more detailed approach and review, but I was struggling at some point in my first game. I managed to find this threefold repetition in the positions that I didn't like already, although at some points I was better, so it was quite a shaky game. But nevertheless, we won the first match, and of course I was very, very happy to win the way I won in the second game, because it's always pleasant to sacrifice a queen, even if it's like checkmate after that in a few moves. But I think overall we're very, very happy. It was a very interesting and tough tournament, and we managed to defend our title.
Yeah, it was a fantastic performance. And as team captain, Alexander, I have to ask you, how did you decide which players to substitute in this final match? Because you made a bunch of changes. You put in Katarina and you took out Alexandra Goryachkina. How did you choose which lineup to use in that final part of the match?
Yeah, but I'm only responsible of men's part. So Rublevsky is the captain of women's team, and he knows his students very well.
It was his fault. Yeah, it was his fault. I needed to play 2 games. I asked him that, I told him that I would prefer to play 1. He listened and said, okay, you're gonna play 2. And same story yesterday. I didn't expect to play the second game at all. I was not preparing with black, to tell you the truth, and it was a very nice surprise to find out that I was going to play, but well, at the end he was right, so yeah.
Yeah, and not only did you win that game, but you won it in spectacular style, as you mentioned, sacrificing your queen. When did that concept come to you that you were possibly going to get this knight g5, rook h8, h7 mate idea?
Well, when she was thinking for a long time after my queen e2 move, I cannot say that I calculated everything, but I saw this checkmating idea with the rook and knight in the corner, like knight g5 and rook h7 already. And well, and then queen e5, it's quite easy to find when you see this idea like this, deflecting the queen. And so sometimes it just, it's, I mean, of course, it looks very beautiful, but it's not that special, since every chess professional solves like dozens of similar tactics, puzzle rush, for example, every day. And of course, this kind of tactics, like we see it, we feel it, there should be something, but nevertheless, it's a pleasure. It's a pleasure to win this way. And I need to thank Irina, because you cannot really create such a masterpiece without your opponent. So that's of course something special.
That's right. Without playing that combative opening, it wouldn't have happened. But yeah, that's why you do all the tactics to get it under this great pressure. Now I have to ask both of you, we often ask at the end of championships, so how are you going to celebrate? And a lot of times, there aren't any specific plans right away, but you literally are in the midst of a celebration, right? It's in the evening in Russia. So tell us a little bit about the noises in the background and the kind of team enthusiasm for this great result.
We're feeling pity for Alexandra.
Yeah, because I'm not in Moscow, unfortunately. So I did my part, but I cannot celebrate with the team, and it's a pity.
For sure, it will be a big celebration tonight.
Yeah, so you're all together except without Alexandra.
And maybe tomorrow.
Three players played from our team played from their home places. So, but most of the players are now in the central chess house in Moscow, and of course, now they can finally celebrate. Yes.
Well, Alexander, I want to ask you a quick question about maybe preparation, because it seems like your team takes this event seriously, of course, celebrating after a tremendous victory. What kind of preparation did you do with your players heading into this event? Because it is rapid and it's online, maybe people are not as used to that kind of format.
Well, actually, after the World Cup, I needed to rest, and that's what I was doing most of the time, like the last months. I know that my teammates had a training camp in Sochi at the end of August, but I was not able to attend. And before that, the week before that, I managed to play a few over-the-board league games in the Swiss league, in the French league, and in the Bundesliga, in the German league. So I played, I don't know, about 4, I think, games. Not successful at all, but probably it was a good warm-up, because sometimes classical chess prepares you well for rapid. So I tried to avoid playing any blitz, any online blitz, because I believe it's totally different time control. And yeah, instead I played these 4 classical games, and somehow I managed to play a few very good games throughout this event.
Wow, was that difficult for you to not play blitz, or pretty easy?
No, I was very tired. So actually, usually I play a Title Tuesday on Chess.com. I play and comment. And for the months of August, I was just commenting. I was just following the tournaments and not playing. And no, I've played enough during the World Cup, even though I skipped all the tie breaks, but still there was a lot of chess. So no, sometimes you need, to you need to stop playing to get this appetite for chess, because and energy, you need to refill your batteries. Otherwise, it's difficult to balance between, like, especially for me, because I'm the player who depends on the energy. And if I run out of energy, I cannot perform. So I think I've done something good in this month, and I decided to myself also to skip some events and not to play several tournaments in a row. So now I'm trying to choose priorities. For example, I'm skipping the Euro Cup, I'm skipping the Russian Super Final, because we have the World Team Championship coming in 10 days. And again, even though we played online, but it was 2 tense weeks, and I need to rest and again recharge, refuel my batteries.
Wow. Well, great insight from somebody who stayed on top for so long. You can only do that if you have that great approach to making sure that you have the energy and the enthusiasm. Speaking of enthusiasm, Alexander, did you when your players are in time pressure, is it difficult for you to watch? Do you watch with both eyes open, or?
Yeah, for me it's difficult to watch every match. Not necessary if it is time pressure or not. Anyway, I'm nervous, so it's difficult test this tournament for me, and previous also. So I think I had to go for holidays after this. So,
not only players, but the captains and trainers as well.
We had a lot of tough matches, so it was not easy work for us at all. So, okay, for me as a coach, as a captain, it was not difficult experience, but it's good we have a nice finish.
Well deserved. Where are you going on holiday? Have you chosen the destination yet?
I think I will spend time just with my family in Moscow. But maybe I will go something. I skip European Club Cup, but I will play myself as a sportsman in Russian Super Final, and I'm going to play Grand Swiss, so I need to rest before.
You need to rest. Staycation. I don't know if you have a word for that in Russian. That's what we call it, staycation.
Well, I guess we shouldn't keep you from your party for too long. I'm sure everyone wants to celebrate with you, Alexander. And Alexandra, sorry you won't be able to join the party, but the party is in no small part because of you. So I'm sure you will be celebrated because you had a tremendous final game there. I called it the brilliancy of the tournament. I really loved it. So congratulations to you both.
Thank you.
We would like to congratulate all the prize winners, medalists, and especially USA team for this tough match in the end. I mean, if USA team would have won, probably it was like wonder on ice. Like, do you remember it? So I mean, it was not probably strongest line in USA, but I mean, the team played very well. Its team spirit was great. I mean, every match it was like they lost first match and then take a revenge and then won in blitz. So and we were hoping not to go to blitz. And
yeah, actually,
last match.
Quick question for you before I let you go. I know I said I would, but Alexander, what did you think about Awonder Liang's performance? Because Andre, of course, the big favorite by rating, but Awonder was really impressive, winning both games against him.
I don't know what happened with Andre this today, just terrible. But it's good what in our team we have a lot of strong players who can support and like insurance, like all of our players can do very well, and hopefully they saved Andre and me myself today. I don't know what he was playing. Just sometimes, you know, it happens. You had a bad day, and I just cannot explain what happened. Okay, we will have a talk with him. I'm his coach, personal coach. So okay, we will talk and try to avoid in future such a disaster. But okay, it's happened, and hope it's good what our team helped him and me, and we won match in the end.
Yeah, well, you're doing a great job as his coach. I think everyone has loved seeing him improve throughout the year, his win against Magnus Carlsen, of course, in Vikings. So keep up the great work. We'll let you go party now. Alexandra, thank you for joining us as well. And really huge congratulations to Team Russia.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks to you both, indeed. Congratulations and thank you for the stellar performance, Robert. What great insights from the top of Team Russia, Alexander Kostyuk, the MVP in the final round, and Alexander Motilev, that a fantastic coach, really giving us some insight in that interview as we see the results, gold medals for Russia, fantastic performance by the United States, getting the silver medals. By the way, India and China sharing bronze medals, in fact, bronze medal certificates for both teams, as there was no third place match. But it was the story of the United States and their upset run, and then stopped by the tremendous performance of Team Russia.
Yeah, really a great showing by the Russian contingent. And what was especially interesting to me there was that Grandmaster Motilev is the personal coach of some of the players. I know from coaching the U.S. Women's National Team, you already have so many nerves working with the team for that specific tournament. But to see the player you work with year in, year out, that must be next level. And he said, Andre had a tough day. We'll visit, see what happened in today's matchup. Credit to Awonder Liang for a fantastic showing, because without him, USA would not have had a chance in this match. But he upset his super grandmaster opponent in both games, and yet Team Russia prevails because, as Grandmaster Motilev said, they have insurance. They have so many strong players who can thrive at any moment, and Alexander Kostyuk was the hero that they needed in that second match to ensure that they did not have to go to tie breaks.
Absolutely. Well, it was a stunning match. I think the unforgettable tactics by Alexander Kostyuk are going to be on people's minds as they play through that combination. Yes, the reason you love to watch these championships is partly because it inspires you to think about your own game and the dazzling games you can play. I've had so much fun, Robert, calling both this and yesterday's USA-India match with you. And, you know, it's just been so competitive and the games have been so exciting. Love this time control. So yeah, big thank you to everyone at chess.com and to FIDE. And of course, to our wonderful producer, Vic, who has done so much throughout the Olympiad, even calling many of the matches earlier on the event. It's been an entire month of, you know, fierce competition and great storylines.
Yeah, it really does not get any more fun than this. And speaking of storyline, there's a chess queen who likes to sacrifice her chess queen to win matches for her country. So Alexander Kostenyuk will not forget that magnificent game to take her team to the gold medals and the glory. But thank you, Jen, for joining. As you said, it has been an absolute blast. I want to thank everybody who's been tuning in every single day for pretty much the last month, enjoying the action, supporting their countries and their favorite players. But for now, we have to say goodbye because the FIDE Online Olympiad presented by chess.com is over. Please, everybody, keep enjoying the chess, keep watching, and have a great day.